Thomas, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Thomas, are you okay with talking with us today? Is that okay?
Yes, thank you, Nathan. It's a pleasure to be here and listening to Senor Antonio Badillo and all of his aspects on the customs and traditions of a tribe, which, we carry the same customs and traditions, and we carry the same aspect of looking at, the sea and the water and the life it carries. And as you were alluding to, and he was alluding to earlier, is, we're talking about the borders and international borders, and you're talking about the division. And, we as the Cahuilla look to a time, and we remember when the time was peaceful before the borders, before counties, before cities, before political divisions. When we were a people, and I always talk about the unification we had as a people. We were free to roam and free to travel and free to migrate. And as you know, all the roads that we have now are because of the trade routes that the natives had. And when I say natives, I mean the natives throughout the area, and which is now we call, Mexico, and now we call it California, United States. But as natives, we were here. But I'm talking about the natives before any division and before any borders were here. So again, those customs and traditions have been since time immemorial, and we are excited to see, something tangible actually happening. And we're actually excited to work with the tribes of the South and actually start a relationship that was once lost many, many years ago.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I mean, as you said, this is a artificial line that somebody put in the sand a long time ago. And just looking at this image that we have on our screen, you can see the division. You can see more water on the U.S. side being used than on the Mexico side. You can see that there is a dry Mexicali where you have an area and an opportunity to bring water to that region. It was talked about yesterday about the use of ocean water for farming and ocean water for landscape. I can imagine a green Mexicali using the ocean water that could be diverted over there too. So talk really briefly, because Thomas, you've spent ever since I've gone to the Salton Sea Authority meetings, you've been one of the board members. More recently, a year or so ago, you were the president of the Salton Sea Authority, and I've always really appreciated your perspective on the policy. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that, and just overall your thoughts about the posture and the collaborative opportunities with that organization as well.
Yes, again, and again, thank you, Nathan, for having me on today and having the opportunity to have our say. And you're right. I joined the Salton Sea Authority as a council member, and back in 2013. So over 7 years, I've been on there, and it was exciting when I first was on there because I was advocating with them, going to the state of California, and we've even traveled to the D.C. Capitol, and testified before Congress. I testified recently, as September last year, to Congress about the Salton Sea and the liabilities that the federal government has because they own many parts of land underneath the Salton Sea. And so you're right. After over 7 years, I've been a part of the Salton Sea Authority. And in the beginning, we as a tribe thought it was an avenue and a joint power authority, because that's what it is. One entity has no power like the joint power authority that we had, and we couldn't do it as a tribe alone, and IID couldn't do it alone, and CVWD and County of Imperial and the County of Riverside. So together, all of us, advocating for the Salton Sea, and I think what we've accomplished in the 7 years, politically or legislatively, I think it's a success. But when we look at it as a tribe, and like I've said to the governor, and I've said to Congress, and when I spoke before them, and I said I've carried the voice of my elders, because when I listened to my elders at our meetings, and I listened to them speak, and they said, we've been hearing these promises for over 50 years, right? Many of them remember as children, uh, recreating and living off of the sea, and our ancestors have known it to be, an event that, like everyone knows, it's a recurring event every few hundred years. So again, as far as the Salton Sea, the policy as I known it in the beginning, 2013, was to advocate for the succession of the sea and recession of the water. And as time went by, as a Cahuilla people, we have grown tired of the, study after study and the political agenda that just distracts from the actual cause of the problem, and solving all of the symptoms around the sea. So, in summary, we as a tribe, the Torres Martinez tribe, want to see something like this project happening. We want to see something that is going to be successful, and we believe the only resolution is a sea to sea transport. Bringing water in and transferring it back out. That's the only resolution that we see. We've, in the beginning, when we saw this perimeter lake uh resolution, we saw it as, okay, they're going to start something because they proposed to build, part of the levee on the reservation because of the lack of barriers, and it would be the fastest way. But here we are 7 years later, and now it's questionable. The tribe's questioning everything. The tribe's wants to see something, and a lot of the tribal members are happy to see, Nathan, this event and this type of structure happening, because it looks like it's something feasible. It's something that can be done in a quick manner. 7 years ago, if we would have entertained something like this and pushed on it, I think we'd be enjoying all of the fruition of our endeavors that we've accomplished this far. But here we are. We took our blind faith in a joint adventure that we thought was going to be successful. And again, I know legislatively and politically it was successful. We got some.
I think you accidentally muted yourself, Thomas.
How much did you hear?
Yeah, legislatively, you were talking about funding legislatively, which is a great conversation. I was just going to ask you a few questions about that.
Okay, sure.
No, go ahead. Yeah, you said a few years ago there was some funding that came in legislatively, so I didn't want to stop you on that point because that's really important.
Oh, okay, yeah. So advocating for the sea, we were able to reach the 80 million, several years ago, and then increased it now to over 200 million from the state that's allocated for the sea. And then we're reaching out, and that was my testimony September last year to Congress, when I said they should at least match that, because what the United States have done as far as environmentally injustice to the communities, they've done just that. In the Everglades, if anyone could research that, the Everglades, they've done a federal emergency assistance to help the Everglades when that was an environmental catastrophe. So I believe they could do the same, if they looked at it with the same, open mind. And again, with the state and the money that's there, the Salton Sea Authority seems to think that there's a first right of access to that. But the money is open to any resolution of the sea. And I think this is a good resolution that, just as any other resolution, I know Nathan and those on the call have heard all different kinds of resolutions, and I think this is one of the quickest and fastest way. So again, like I said, the sea to sea resolution, I believe, and we as a tribe believe, is one of the best resolutions.
That's a great point. The resolution to support just the concept of sea to sea, of bringing water from the Sea of Cortez, that's been signed on by most of the local municipalities in Coachella Valley, some of those in El Centro as well. Just on that topic, it's really interesting that you know, Imperial County hosted a presentation of all of the water imports before the state actually released their findings of that study. So there is support on getting something done. Like you just said, everybody is on the same page. You know, looking at something and studying it is great, but there's a time for schematic design, there's a time for design development, and then there's a time for construction. And we're really excited in bringing this forward, and I'm very thankful to hear all of those kind words, is that there is a rational approach. You know, funding in the Salton Sea could be deployed to develop the Salton Sea things. I'm going to share something real quick, and I just want to get your feedback, because this is a concept that we're still in development of, just specific to the Salton Sea itself. You know, so this we talked about a little bit briefly yesterday. We talked about it in the beginning. You know, we're looking at this not being a final solution, but just saying, you know, this is the North Lake that everybody wants to propose and build. There's a resolution, there's support from Imperial County, there's a support from Riverside County to do a North Lake design. You know, we've taken it a little bit of a step further with proposing islands within the very uppermost part to dampen some of the wave action and to do some more phytoremediation, phytomining. But we looked at the budget that they had for a North Lake, and we kind of compared that with our own budget and said, if we did the systems like we are proposing for the entirety of this project and just used sediment that's down in the Salton Sea and had a couple barges that are pumping that into something like this, it could be done for about 10% of the budget, and it could be done a lot faster than their proposed schedule would include. It's just a matter of, like you said, is there a resolution for North Lake alternatives? Is there a resolution from the state to look at, can we get that into the hands of people that can do it faster or cheaper? You know, I know Rob and myself, we're ready to buy a couple barges, and I'd be happy to start moving some sediment around myself. But I just wanted to talk overall, like we're looking at the parts per thousand. We're looking at mostly a full restored Salton Sea. This salt sink is a little bit larger than I would prefer, but it kind of is just saying what needs to happen to encapsulate some of the salt that's in the region. But we're going to have technology partners, and we're vetting those right now. Eventually, we could have a desal addition component where this becomes obsolete, and we can just delete it the same way that we built it, you know, for a fraction of the cost of a perimeter lake. So talk to us a little bit about the ideas, the politics, you know, how come the Salton Sea Authority might not have a grant program for some of their funding? How come it happens to be in this ambiguous kind of budget that might not be hitting the ground as quickly as it could? Do you have any thoughts on that, Thomas? No. Maybe he dropped off. See, we have connection issues on the north side of the border too. Let's see. I'm going to stop sharing that real quick. We're going to get him back on and see. I think we have Cesar Perez. You're in here as well. Let's jump in. Cesar, are you there? He doesn't have his microphone. Thomas, do you have any thoughts on that before we move on to the next one? Or what are your thoughts about overall Salton Sea restoration? I know this is something near and dear to your heart. You're excited to get projects in the ground quickly. You know, how does that work as far as the deployment of capital that's already in the bucket, or is there other opportunities that we can start looking towards? I know since we started this conference, gotten many calls about seed funding in different ways, but overall, you know, I had conversations with other agencies and entities. It would be great if the state or the local agencies were able to do some match funding. What are your thoughts on that? If you could just talk about that briefly, Thomas, before we close out.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah. Sorry about that.
Connection problem. Yeah. So yeah, I believe if we advocate in that sense, as far as looking at all different opportunities for this event to happen. There's enormous opportunity. I believe just like we've done with joint venturing and joint advocating, I think it can be successful.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, that's been a thought that we had. Is there a means of support of overall projects? And I don't want to undercut any of the other proposals for seawater import. You mentioned briefly water in, water out. That became our predominant reason for designing the project as it is right now, is that we would only ever bring Salton Sea water, or I'm sorry, ocean water into the Salton Sea, and then we would encapsulate that within the Salton Sea to not have that additional energy cost, loading cost, negative impact to the environment of the Sea of Cortez. But that's kind of the design where we came up with the encapsulation of a salt sink. But overall, that discussion we've had with some of the Kumeyaay members too is it would be great to have a joint resolution of Torres Martinez and Kukapa tribe saying we support the effort of water import. And again, I didn't want to undercut any of the other proposals that are looking at water import. I just want to bring forward a discussion that Laguna Solata has the benefit to help the local economy of Mexico, help the local tourism in that region, just exactly in the same way that restoring the Salton Sea does. So maybe you can talk a little bit about the Laguna Solata restoration. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, my objective opinion when I started this was, if we restored Laguna Solata, we're reducing a pipeline that might be, 70 miles. So for me, I just did a cost benefit analysis and said, if we do 70 less miles of piping, that's a few million to maybe $100 million savings or more. What are your thoughts about Laguna Solata, Thomas, before we jump into the next group?
Yeah, I believe that's up to the tribe that's there, and if they're willing to work with us and use their land and gain the overall benefit of that, then we as a tribe support our local tribes there, and but still, we're thinking the same thing as Torres Martinez. We're looking at all avenues of resolution, and this is again, I know this is one of them. We're just I'm glad you brought that up. That it's just bringing inflow in, but still, that's a resolution, and I think again that's the fastest resolution. And you're right, there are other resolutions. There's people that want to bring the inflow and outflow of Pacific water, along the 10. There are people that want to bring inflow and outflow of seawater from San Diego, and those are still, you're right, those are still good propositions. But those take time, they take money, they take jurisdictional barriers to overcome. Again, that's why Torres Martinez believes this is the ultimate fastest way to get the resolution of the sea and benefiting all of those along the route, including the Kukapa tribe. And if it's their opinion that Laguna Solata would benefit, then we are in total agreement with that.
Absolutely. Well, and I didn't invite some of the other groups here to, over these 3 days, only because there is a forum for that. And I hope next year when we have maybe this in-person event, maybe this celebration again of restoring the Salton Sea. But really, I wanted to elevate through these 3 days of technology is the importance of Laguna Solata, because that hasn't been discussed at the state, federal level. The Laguna Solata estuary becomes an important factor for us as a team, but also for the property owners that we were engaged with first, which is the Kukapa. Their ability to see a restored Laguna Solata brings and elevates their discussion to the same level. So there hasn't been a resolution at the Salton Sea Authority yet for water import. Do you think that would be a helpful element to move things forward as the Salton Sea Authority reports to the State Water Board and other agencies? Do you think that might be of interest to propose, or is the tribe interested in making that proposal?
Yeah, sure. We can advocate for that. Again, I know the Salton Sea Authority, they're kind of stuck on the perimeter lake, but I think with the perimeter lake and merging this project with that. I think that it's a faster resolution. With the Salton Sea Authority, from what I know, and the Sea of Cortez importation, I think there's a concern about the politics involved, and I think that's the major barrier. So, but if we could overcome that and provide education just like you've done here, and I'm grateful that you provided all the education that's good as far as the paradigm, like you're saying, the paradigm is, oh, we can't work with Mexico, but overcoming that, I think, is the biggest thing. So if we advocate with more education like this, showing that there is a way and there is, there is a way of working with the people, and they're open to that. So, but I think that's what we need to do with this education type of.
Yeah, and that was really the purpose yesterday and again today, is to elevate the topic, because I know, I believe you were there and there were other people there, but we went to a forum that was at Agua Caliente, and they invited some of the political officials. This must have been 5 years ago or so, but they invited some of the political officials from Mexico, and the question was raised: is there support, and is there going to be support in Mexico? And I heard when I was there the unanimous consent that Mexico is interested in helping because it affects them, and not a week or a month or a year later that same question was proposed. So again, like you said, this is the real reason why we're hosting this event, to elevate that conversation. Yesterday was talked about briefly, and that conversation was reiterated. How and why would Mexico be interested in a project, any project, to restore the Salton Sea? And the big response and the overwhelming response is, what is the benefit to Mexico? If a pipeline crossed their land, what benefit would they have? They might get monetary funding on an annual basis, but is that true value? And does that true value or perceived value, does that get disseminated to anybody specifically, or does it get disseminated to the federal government, and the people of Mexicali or of Mexico don't really see those benefits? So that became a real driving force in the real defined consideration of Laguna Solata restoration. This is a direct benefit, both ecologically, but in also for renewable energy and job creation. That becomes a paradigm for allowing people to participate, and really have a direct benefit. So that is something that became the paramount concern. So yesterday, the big question that was brought forward from some of the officials and representatives of Mexico is, the big concern becomes, how does it get paid for, and how does a proposal get funding? And I think we have a lot of creative solutions for that. But Mexico itself doesn't have a lot of funding for large capital projects, but there might be some sort of process and collaboration on both sides of the border where Mexico can put some funding in. Mexicali can put some funding in. The SSA can put some funding in. The state can put some in. The federal government of Mexico can put some in. The federal government of the United States. And, with that kind of collaboration approach, this proposal is plus or minus $1 billion, right? And that's kind of where we're looking at from a dollars and cents perspective. That is the cheapest, lowest cost restoration of any of the competitive agencies with the highest benefit. So that's why we're excited to resubmit to the state. We want to elevate that conversation. We had a question here. Do you have any thoughts on that, or should I go into the question, Thomas?
Nathan, this is Roger Arnold. I have a comment, if I could jump in.
Yep.
It's about cost and the issue of, well, you had noted that there hasn't yet been a firm commitment to import seawater at all. I think it's really important to understand the the primary benefit of the importation, or just in terms of the cost. What it allows is to maintain a uniform sea level in the Salton Sea. You talked about the cost of the peripheral lake and the solutions there. Most of the cost, if you look at the various studies that have been done estimating the cost, is to build a dike that's capable of withstanding earthquakes, because there's a big difference in the water level, one side versus the other. So you've got hydrostatic pressure, and you need a fairly robust structure to withstand that. If you have the same level on both sides, all you really need is a divider. And that has a tremendous effect on the overall cost of dividing the sea into these different regions. And so it's a much more economical solution to import seawater. And I think that's a point that gets missed, and people tend to think of that as an extra expense. It's not. It's a way to enable a lower cost solution. Also better, because it's much better for dust suppression and so on. But it really should be a no-brainer to commit to the import of the seawater.
Absolutely. No, that's a great point. And I'll mention, maybe you can just read that real quick. Thank you, Roger. I appreciate that input. Let me